إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما أما بعد فإن أصدق الحديث كتاب الله وخير الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار أما بعد. My dear brothers and sisters in Islam, today I have some good news and I have some very bad news. And to begin with the bad news, so that there's hope inshallah at the end of our program, I have to tell you as a community that there is a viral outbreak spreading amongst us. There is a disease which is spreading amongst our communities that will ultimately be the destruction of our center and the various centers in our neighboring area. This disease, it is a disease that begins in the heart, and eventually it works its way into the tongue. This disease is none other than al-ghiba. It destroys the soul, undermines the community and the bonds of brotherhood and sisterhood. It is something that is very old and ancient, and the Prophet ﷺ, sitting with his companions, once asked them, "Atadruna mal ghiba?" Do you know what ghiba is? And they responded by saying, Allahu wa rasuluhu a'lam. Allah and His Messenger know best. The Prophet ﷺ then responded by saying, ذِكْرُكَ أَخَاكَ بِمَا يَكْرَهُ. To mention your brother or your sister with that which he is displeased with. To say something about your brother or sister in Islam which they do not like for you to say about them. They do not want you to spread. They do not want you to tell others. And this is what the Prophet ﷺ said was al-ghiba. And we call it backbiting. The companions then said to the Prophet ﷺ, أَرَأَيْتَ إِنْ كَانَ فِي أَخِي مَا أَقُولُ. What do you think about that I say which is present in my brother or sister? I'm not making up a lie. I'm only speaking the truth. A bad quality or negative aspect about that person that's real. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, إِن كَانَ فِيهِ مَا تَقُولُ فَقَدْ اغْتَبْتَ. If you're saying something which is true, then you have made ghiba. You are backbiting. وَإِن لَمْ يَكُنْ فِيهِ فَقَدْ بَهَتَّ. And if you're saying something which is false, then it's considered slander. The Prophet ﷺ gave us a very comprehensive and broad understanding of what al-ghiba is. But when you look at the nature of this word and this disease, you can see that in the past it has been defined for us very clearly. Anything that your brother or sister does not want you to mention, that does not want to be spread, and you say it, then you are at fault. Whether it's their height, or their weight, their eye color, their skin color, their job, the house they live in, the car that they drive, about their children and their children's behavior. Whatever it is that they do not prefer that you spread around the community, then you have to refrain from it and abstain from it. If someone is very short and you're referring to them constantly as, the short guy or the short girl, and she doesn't like or he doesn't like that you say this is considered al-ghiba. You know that one that doesn't pray in the masjid at Fajr, that one, this is ghiba. Even if it's true, it's not something that they prefer you mention, so it is something that is in this category of backbiting. The Prophet ﷺ prohibited this type of behavior. He told us that this is an impermissible way of using a blessing, which is our voice, our ability to express our thoughts and our ideas. That we are to only express that which is positive. The Prophet ﷺ, he said in an authentic narration, يَا مَعْشَرَ مَنْ آمَنَ بِلِسَانِهِ وَلَمْ يَدْخُلِ الْإِيمَانُ فِي قَلْبِهِ. O you who believe with your tongues, but the real iman has not entered into your hearts. لَا تَغْتَابُ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. Do not backbite the believers. Do not speak ill of those who have faith. وَلَا تَتَبَّعُوا أَوْرَاتَهُمْ. And do not follow up after their faults. Sometimes we do this. Someone makes a mistake. Someone has an error or a fault. And we're constantly looking at them and judging them. What are their mistakes? What are their faults? I don't see them in the center. I don't see them in the masjid. Their children are doing this. Their children are doing that. They're behaving this manner. Constantly looking for things that are negative in someone else. The Prophet ﷺ, he says, فَإِنَّ مَنِ اتَّبَعَ أَوْرَاتَهُمْ يَتْبَعِ اللَّهُ أَوْرَاتَهُ. Whoever follows after the faults of their brother or sister, then Allah Azza wa Jal will follow after their own faults. وَمَنْ يَتْبَعُ اللَّهُ أَوْرَتَهُ يَفْضَحُهُ وَهُوَ فِي بَيْتِهِ. And whoever Allah Azza wa Jal follows after their faults, then He will expose them, even if they're hiding in the depths of their own home. This is the reward, we should say, or the payment, for someone who is seeking to expose the faults of the people. Their community members, their neighbors, their families. You're seeking to expose their faults, to make them look small or belittle them, to disrespect them, to dishonor them. And by doing that, Allah Azza wa Jal will turn full circle and expose you for your own faults. Even though you're trying so hard to cover them, trying so hard to conceal them, trying so hard to play the community and make it seem as if everyone else is at fault but your own self. Brothers and sisters, this act of backbiting, this act of ghiba, it is so filthy, it is so vile and disgusting that the Prophet ﷺ, he told us in an authentic narration that not only does it affect our soul and our hereafter, but it is a cause for environmental disturbance. The Prophet ﷺ once with his companions, he was sitting with them, as reported in authentic hadith. He said, as the companions reported, كُنَّا مَعَ النَّبِيِّ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمْ فَارْتَفَعَتْ رِيحٌ مُنْتِنَا. We were sitting with the Prophet ﷺ, and all of a sudden, a very foul, smelly odor passed by us. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, أَتَدْرُونَ مَا هَذِهِ الرِّيحِ. Do you know what this odor is? Do you know what this foul smell is? The companions, they responded again, Allahu wa rasuluhu a'lam. That Allah and His Prophet know best. He says, هَذِهِ رِيحُ الَّذِينَ يَغْتَابُ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. This is the foul odor of the people that are backbiting the believers. That the act is so disgusting that it can actually create environmental change. That it is so vile that it will materialize in your world. Not only through the form of the smell, but in your life, things will begin to crumble and topple around you. Your family members will see who you are, trying to expose them and talk bad about them. Your community members, your employees, your employer, they will all see the nature of who you are, that you are trying to belittle them. And your life will begin to fall apart. And all of this, it only takes one word. The thing about backbiting, the thing about speaking improperly, it's so easy to do. The people of the past, they used to say that there's one muscle in the body that never tires. It's not your arms or your legs, but it's your tongue. Because the tongue can go all day long and you never need to rest it. You can speak for hours and hours on end and you don't even need to get up, lie down, take a breather, take a break. And normally what happens is we begin talking in a good manner. But shortly thereafter, our tongues, we lose control of them. Our mouths, we let go unchecked. And eventually we fall into these bad qualities and characteristics of ghibah. And this was the situation with the Prophet ﷺ and his wife Aisha radiyallahu anha, the mother of the believers. And she reported this, saying, قلت للنبي صلى الله عليه وسلم حسبك من صفية كذا وكذا تعني قصيرة. She said to the Prophet ﷺ, her husband, enough with you and this Safiya, his other wife. Forget about her. And it was meant, her intention was, she's short. She was one of the shortest with the Prophet ﷺ. So he said, forget about her, she's short. It doesn't sound very bad. She didn't say that she's a sinner, that she's a hypocrite, that she's a liar. She didn't call her something terrible, something ugly or foul, but she said she was short. And because this woman didn't like that someone called her this name or by this description, the Prophet ﷺ responded to his wife and he said, لَقَدْ قُلْتِ كَلِمَةً لَوْ مُزِجَتْ بِمَاحِ الْبَحْرِ لَمَزَجَتْهُ. You have just said one word that if it were to be mixed with the ocean of this world, 2/3 of this world is made up of water. And one word, he said, it would spoil all of that water. It would ruin everything therein. All of the life, the sea creatures, everything would be in an environment that would no longer be sustainable and they would die. This is the nature of al-ghibah, the nature of backbiting, and how destructive it is in a community. It is viral. It is an outbreak. It begins with one word, and the results, they are total destruction. In the past several weeks, we've talked about how to build a community, how to build a strong community, developing a center, developing a community bond of brotherhood and sisterhood. And the first element that will destroy that, it is beginning to speak ill of one another, beginning to expose one another's faults, to belittle them and lessen them in the eyes of the community members. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala acknowledges the nature of this ghibah. And in fact, in the Quran, in Surah Al-Hujurat, ayah number 12, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He calls this type of speech cannibalism. If you could imagine sitting right there for a moment, reflect upon this ayah when Allah Azza wa Jalla, He says, أَيُحِبُّ أَحَدُكُمْ أَن يَأْكُلَ لَحْمَ أَخِيهِ مَيْتًا فَكَرِهْتُمُوهُ فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ. Would you love, any of you sitting right here, to eat the flesh of your brother? Would you love to eat the skin, the meat that is on the backs of your brothers and sisters? Indeed, you would despise this. You would hate this act of cannibalism. This is al-ghibah, backbiting. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us a very clear description of this. So I ask you as you're sitting here, are you that deprived of nutrition that you have to seek it from the backs of your brothers and sisters? Are you that deprived of attention? Are you that angry Are you that spiteful and evil that you would seek to belittle your own friends and family members, your own community, so that you could find attention, so that you could look better in front of everyone else, and risk and put your hereafter on the line for that? Put your community on the line for that. This is cannibalism in its worst form. Because it affects not only you, it affects everyone. So if it is the case, if that's the case, and this is where you need your nutrition, then get ready for mealtime. Get ready for dinner. Put on your bib and get ready to lap it up. One of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, he was with his friends, and they passed by a rotting carcass of a donkey. Think of this. Foul odor. Opened up. The innards are hanging out. Rotting with maggots and disease. And this man, the companion of the Prophet ﷺ, he said that it is better that you sit down at this carcass and you fill your bellies full with that rotting meat than to speak one ill word of your brother or sister in Islam. To speak one foul word, to take part in al-ghiba. You should eat and fill yourself, not one bite, not one taste, but to fill yourself and gorge yourself on this meal. Brothers and sisters, we have to remember this example in our minds. The moment that we begin to speak about somebody in a negative light, think of that meal time. Think of that food that you will be filling yourselves and your stomachs. Sitting here, this might not mean anything to you. Because the reality is you would never do something like that. We would never sit down and eat rotten meat, though we would sit down for an hour or two and backbite one another. So the Prophet ﷺ told us that there will be no escape from this type of meal in the hereafter. You will be made to sit down at the dinner table. As he said in authentic narration, مَنْ أَكَلَ لَحْمَ أَخِيهِ مَنْ أَكَلَ لَحْمَ أَخِيهِ فِي الدُّنْيَا قُرِّبَ لَهُ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ فَيُقَالُ لَهُ كُلْهُ مَيْتًا كَمَا أَكَلْتَهُ حَيًّا. Whoever ate the flesh of their brothers in this life while they were alive, whoever was backbiting them while they were still alive and breathing, then on Yawm al-Qiyamah, that dead, rotting carcass will be brought in front of you. And it will be ordered, eat and fill yourselves. And you will be struggling and screaming for relief. So I say this as a reminder. And I hope that we can walk away from this remembering these examples. Remembering the severity of al-ghiba. وأقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين من كل ذنب فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. بسم الله والحمد لله حمدا كثيرا طيبا مباركا فيه كما يحب ربنا ويرضاه ونصلي ونسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين وبعد. Brothers and sisters, this backbiting, this is a major sin in Islam. A major sin. It is a sin that destroys your soul. The Prophet ﷺ, sitting with his companions, he said, أَلَا أُنَبِّئُكُمْ بِأَكْبَرِ الْكَبَائِرِ? Should I not inform you of the greatest, the most major of sins? And the companions, they said, بَلَا يَا رَسُولَ اللَّهِ. Of course, tell us what they are. The Prophet ﷺ, he said 3 times, al-ishraku billah, associating partners with Allah in worship. وَأُقُوقُ الْوَالِدَيْنِ, and dishonoring and being disrespectful to your parents. The Prophet ﷺ, as it's reported, he was sitting down. He was leaning on his side. كَانَ مُتَّكِئًا فَجَلَسَ. He was lying down and he stood up so that his companions would be at attention. so that they would understand the nature of what he was about to say, that it was extremely important. And he said, أَلَا وَقَوْلُ الزُّورِ وَعَمَلُ الزُّورِ. And he repeated this over and over again. A false, evil statement and a false, evil action. Referring directly to al-ghiba, backbiting. That this is included in not only major sins, but the most severe of those major sins. The Prophet ﷺ also indicated to us that backbiting, al-ghiba, is a cause for the punishment in the grave. When we leave this life, when we leave this world, the next phase of our existence will be in that place, in that second home, our graves, until we have to meet Allah Azza wa Jal. And that place will either be one of two existences. Either happiness and relief, or punishment and grief. The Prophet ﷺ with his companions one day, they passed by a graveyard. As it was reported, مَرَّ بِقَبْرَيْنِ فَقَالَ إِنَّهُمَا لَيُعَذَّبَانِ وَمَا يُعَذَّبَانِ فِي كَبِيرٍ. The Prophet ﷺ passed by these graves, two graves, and he said, the two inhabitants of these graves, they are being punished. And they're not being punished from something great, something major. أَمَّا أَحَدُهُمَا فَيُعَذَّبُ فِي الْبَوْلِ وَأَمَّا الْآخَرُ فَيُعَذَّبُ فِي الْغِيبَةِ. The first of them, they are being punished because when they would use the restroom, they would mess themselves and walk around in a state of filth. The second one is being punished in his grave for al-ghiba, for backbiting. Now in the beginning of this narration, this hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, وَمَا يُعَذَّبَانُ فِي كَبِيرٍ وَمَا يُعَذَّبَانِ فِي كَبِيرٍ. They're not being punished for something big. The Prophet ﷺ here is not saying that it's not major. What he's saying that it is something that is not big in our minds. It is not something major from our perspective, that we can sit down and speak for an hour or two or three or for our entire lives, and it is not no importance to it. Whether we're talking negative about this one, that one, and the other. It doesn't seem to be damaging. It doesn't seem to be hurtful because the person is not present. We're not talking about them in front of them. That would be offensive. So we'd rather save those words when they are not there, when they cannot defend themselves, when we can undermine them and dishonor them. And for that reason, the person will be punished in their grave continuously until they meet Allah Azza wa Jal. Something so effortless, backbiting. Something so easy to take part in. Like I said, it's viral. It spreads. When you're sitting with someone and they begin to speak ill of someone else, our nature is simply to join in, to help them out, to add what you want to say as well, your opinion and your evil thoughts. It is hard to control your soul and your desires, to fight that and say, wait, one moment, let's not talk about this. Let's change the subject. Or let's just be quiet. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, مَنْ كَانَ يُؤْمِنُ بِاللَّهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ فَلْيَقُلْ خَيْرًا أَوْ لَيَصْمُتْ. For those who believe in Allah and the last day, then let them only speak good words. And if they cannot speak good words, then let them remain silent and close their mouths. Sometimes we need to be silent, brothers and sisters. Sometimes we need to be forgiving. Sometimes we need to overlook the faults of our community members for the betterment of our souls in the hereafter and our communities in this life. So I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect all of us, to guide all of us to speak truthful and good words, to give us the strength to come together and to rejoin as a community, and to move forward and develop as good, righteous individuals contributing to our society. وصلى الله وسلم على نبينا محمد وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين. وأقم الصلاة.